Hey, on today's episode, we want to talk a little bit about what it means to actually know the will of God for your life. And not in like the finite sense, but to actually be positioned and say, oh, this is what God wants for me. That's what we want to dive into. Purpose, will, calling, how to live that out.
Check it out. Today's episode is brought to you by Logos. Learn more about the world's best Bible study software at logos.com/themove. Today's episode is John chapter 1, verses 6 through 13.
And as always, our question is, have you read it? Do that now. You can find it in the comments below or in the link below. We'll put it there. And then we're going to get to it in 3, 2, 1, go. Just go. I promise. It's right here. Just go. That's right. Just go.
There's a real 10 time. We promise. So there's this guy named John. And I remember reading about John as a kid. It's like, man, this is a weird dude. Like a real weird dude. Lives out there in the middle of nowhere. The Bible talks about him eating
all by himself,
wearing weird clothes. And I think we all had one of those friends in like youth group or something like that. You were probably that weird kid in youth group, weren't you? No, you're too cool for that, aren't you?
Okay, all right. Where are you going with that? That John's a weirdo and he's out there.
I was waiting for you to pick it up and just see where it would go.
Well, here's the thing, is that John being a weirdo, the way it's introduced in the book of John, which it isn't the same John. There's
Different
John the
Johns.
Baptist and then there's John the disciple, right? Mm-hmm. And we believe it's John the disciple that's writing here. But this is after the first 5 verses where we've already established that there's proximity, right? And that this being the Word, who is Jesus, was with God, but now he's with mankind.
Yeah.
And he came to mankind to shine light in darkness because in him was life, and that life is the light.
We jumped ahead and said, oh, therefore, because of what he's doing, his whole mission, we also have proximity to God. But that's not quite how the story builds out yet.
No,
I mean, it gets there. That's the whole point of this book. But this is the first introduction of man.
Yeah.
Man's real weird.
Yeah, the man's real weird. And man, this theme of man is going to emerge throughout the book of John over and over. So you have this first man who gets introduced. Actually, it's the second man is the first one. But nonetheless, it's this man who gets introduced, and then he is sent from God.
Yeah. I love the definitive language that the text uses about John in this way.
Yeah.
Oh, there's no ifs, ands, or but. He might be weird. You might not always like it, but he don't mistake it. He was sent from God. And there are times in my life where I wish I had that same clarity. Just the last 2 days, I was hanging out with a mutual friend of ours, Ben Lundquist. Shout out to Ben if you're ever watching this episode.
Hey, Ben. Hey, how you doing? Hey, Ben.
He's got a deeper voice than Jonathan, which is actually kind of interesting.
Hey, Ben.
And I spent the last 2 days doing a life plan with the whole intent and purpose of, okay, God, what is the purpose of my life? What is my calling? How do you want to use me? What have you been doing in my past, and where does this lead to the future? This idea of what is my purpose in life? What is God's plan for my life? I wish it was as definitive, as simple as it is describing John.
Oh, John. Oh, well, John. Oh, Justin. I totally messed that up. Oh, Justin. But it is, here's what's so dope about this. Verse 6, there was a man sent from God whose name was John. Verse 7, he came as a witness to bear witness about the light, that all might believe through him, right? That all might believe through the one who's going to come, that they might believe what? We're going to talk about that. But that John's life is to bear witness about the light. Later on, we'll also find out that John has a revelation that he's received about Jesus, who is going to come. And Jesus is the one who was with God, who is the light, who will shine in the darkness, and darkness will not overcome. And John stands aside, apart from Jesus, declaring that he is coming, or that he has this role that he's going to fulfill. And John's whole life is wrapped up in telling all men, all humanity, as a man, that there is one who is coming, who is going to shine amongst us in a certain way, right? So that the way that John actually frames it in this passage right here is that John can almost stand in for
anyone, any old John. So part of the purpose of life is for us to be reflecting of God's glory. You know, it's the kind of thing that we hear in church on the weekends as kids over and over. Oh, you know, God's created you. You're beautiful.
Yeah.
You're wonderfully made. And he's going to use you to reflect his goodness. Okay, like that's cool and all. And that's great and all. But does that mean then that I must go into ministry? I guess that's kind of the way I look at it. Is because when I think about the people who reflect the light, you think of people like John. You think of people like Peter who are out there actively pursuing like this calling of ministry.
Yeah.
And I may not always feel like that's for me. So how does that play out in my life then?
Yeah. No, I hear that because then, if my role is to shine, then my role is to do some sort of ministry because that's what shining means.
Right.
And then how do can we just take that off the table completely?
Okay.
I want to take that off the table completely. And I want to hear the text, right? The true light, which gives light to everyone who is coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to his own people did not receive him. And why didn't his own people receive him? His own people received him because they had a whole nother idea of what it meant to, quote unquote, shine for God.
Okay.
Right? In the religious sense. Right?
Okay. So what it meant to shine as a light for God, because this was something that was very important to the Jews back in the day. Like they were the light of the world.
No,
right? This was their major
Yep.
thing.
Yep. Stay on that one. You remember when Rabbi Zacharias
Yes,
said that?
2 Corinthians.
Break that down.
Yeah. So
we
there's
got
this,
time.
for God has given us the light of the knowledge of the glory of God, right? The light of the knowledge of the glory. There's three cultures that are present in that moment. Light, knowledge, glory. There's the Jewish, Greek, and Roman. To the Greeks, thought, knowledge.
Yep.
This was the purpose of everything.
Yep.
Interestingly enough, the word for word up at the beginning is logos, not just a plug for Logos, our sponsor of today's episode, but this idea of knowledge. You see how I did that? One of the questions we have is like, man, we're really grateful that Logos is partnering with us.
Bro,
how do we plug them? So the Greeks were very interested in Logos, in knowledge, in what they could know. So the light of knowledge. Rome was all about glory, power, authority.
Yeah.
To the Jews, light.
Yeah.
This was the major thing.
Yeah. So then for them, when he give them the knowledge of the glory of God, right? To give them the night of the knowledge of the glory of God.
In other words, Jesus is everything to all people. He's everything that anyone could ever want.
Yeah, and to them, to the nation at that moment, the way that they were to shine was in relationship to the law and in relationship to the oracles of God that they received at Sinai.
So I shine by keeping the law super rigorously, by being as perfect as I possibly could be, by checking off all the boxes religiously that I must absolutely do, and by doing that, I am a light.
Well, and
I'm reflecting light.
That is one conception of it, but there's also the place where they knew they were the light of the world. Not because they kept the law, but they had the privilege of keeping the law because that's what kept them in covenant, precisely because they were the chosen. So the fact that they were chosen is what made them shine, right? So we are the children of God because he chose us. And so contrast to that, John is presenting, no. The light actually came into the world, and to those ones who thought they were supposed to shine in a particular way, they didn't receive him, right?
So is it like they are receiving, as they're reading this, a demotion?
Yeah.
In which they're, I'm the light. We're the light of the world. This is our goal. This is our purpose. And he's like, no, hold on. And this is why it says in verse 8, he was not the light, but came to bear witness.
Yes.
About the light.
Yeah, John is not the light. And it was, we were already running out of time. But John stands in and embodies the fulfillment to the end of the law and the prophets, because he's the last great prophet before Messiah is to come, right? So that the work of the law and the prophets is coming to I must decrease, he must increase, right? And John is verbalizing, I'm not the light, he's the light. And then when Jesus comes into the world, he says this. Listen, this is he doesn't say this, but this is the whole point in the text. His own point, they didn't receive him. Verse 12, but to all those who did receive them, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, who were born not of blood nor of the will of flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. And he came to actually bring light. So Jesus came to bring light to Justin, so that Justin might correctly see how he used to identify with darkness. But now that God has identified with you, that you can in turn find your identity in him. In finding your identity in him, you can now live with an identity that says, I am a son of God. I've been redeemed. I am cleansed, and I am born again as a son. No longer in search of identity, but I have it. And to live from that place, to live with that confidence, and then to shine for God from a position of being born again, that is the will of God.
That's the purpose of life. And that can look different for each person.
Yeah.
You could be a shepherd, you could be a priest, you could be a haircutter.
A barber.
A barber,
There
that's
you
the
go.
word. I got
Yeah.
my haircut this morning. That was the example on the top of my mind. Whatever you're doing, the point is to reflect God.
Reflect God.
And sometimes reflecting God means you get to use religious language, like, oh, check out this Bible verse
Yeah.
or this passage. Sometimes reflecting God literally just means reflecting what God is, the very essence of God, and that is love.
Yeah.
Treating people with compassion and dignity and
Yeah.
love. This is the calling
Yeah.
and purpose of life.
Yeah, and so we're going to run out of time here in a second, but what ends up happening is that we have this, you already have a setup at the beginning of John, which is Jesus, the Word, was with God, and Jesus, the Word, was God. He came to men to shine, to let them know that they could be children of God, so that they also could be with God. You see that?
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's so then we have the privilege of living from that place, that we have Emmanuel,
God with us.
God with us, so that we can live with him, so that in all of our withing, we're with him.
Yeah.
That's the goal, to live from that place.
Beautiful. Hey movers, I recently got to travel to the Logos headquarters and ended up recording several tutorials on how you and I can get more from our Bible study using Logos. To see the entire playlist of videos, visit logos.com/themove and get 10% off any Logos 8 product you want. logos.com/themove.